And welcome to this episode of the First Cavalry Horse Detachment, Fort Hood, Texas, part of John's eclectic photo time story adventure series, episode 28.
With us constantly reminding us that even though the fates of war may shift and change,
stand ready!
Still, we are the cavalry!
Fire!
John adjusted the strap on his camera bag and pulled the camera R5 Mark II snug against his shoulder. The sun had just climbed above the horizon, spilling golden light over the rolling grounds of Fort Hood, Texas. Today, he was not here to chase the Milky Way or stalk deer in the brush. Today, he would capture history, the life and spirit of one of the only 7 remaining active horse detachments in the U.S. Army. It was bittersweet work. Beginning in January 2026, their Fort Hood First Cavalry Horse Detachment would begin a 6-month drawdown prior to disbandment. What John was about to photograph wasn't simply a military demonstration. It was the closing chapter of a living legacy, a living tribute to how soldiers once fought and lived more than a century ago. The day's event began with thunder. A cannon salute shattered the quiet morning air, echoing across the parade grounds. Smoke rolled low across the field, the acrid scent of gunpowder drifting on the wind. John raised his lens, snapping rapidly as the gunners in crisp period uniforms stepped back from the iron beast, its barrel still trembling from the recoil. Then came the sound of hoofs. The company commander and the first sergeant rode proudly into the arena, astride strong, dark mounts. Between them, another horse trooper carried the unit standard, a flag rippling in the breeze, colors bright against the deep blue Texas sky. The crowd leaned forward, applause erupting. John caught the scene in frame after frame: dust, leather, polished sabers, the proud faces of horse and rider. The demonstration unfolded like a dance of discipline and tradition. Troopers maneuvered their horses in sharp, precise cavalry movements, wheeling left, charging forward, halting in perfect unison. Then one trooper dismounted, leading his horse into a poignant moment, the recovery of a fallen comrade. He showed how, in battle, a rider could lift a wounded soldier across the saddle and carry him from the field. The audience hushed, recognizing the weight of the act beyond the mere demonstration.
A trot, a gallop, and negotiated in fouls, as well as the columns of 2s and 4s. The drill you are now watching is 2s from the center, left and right about. This drill is the wagon wheel. The riders and mounts perform a wheeling movement in unison.
Copy's ready! Copy's fired!
Coming out of the wagon wheel, the detachment will return into columns of 2s in preparation for the next drill. The next circle is steep, the circles are as follows.
The tempo quickened. Black and yellow balloons, targets symbolizing enemies, were tied around the arena. Troopers drew pistols and thundered past, shattering the balloons with sharp cracks that mingled with the cheers of the crowd. Others drew sabers, gleaming steel arcs that struck down sandbags balanced on yellow stands. Some drove their blades downward as their horses surged past ground targets, sabers piercing balloons with a snap that sent fragments spinning away. Then came the riders who showed true horsemanship, leaping obstacles, firing pistols mid-air, or slashing downward with sabers. Others' mounts landed strong and steady. Dust billowed, horses snorted, and the crowd erupted in applause. John worked the edge of the arena, shutter clicking furiously, capturing image that might one day be the last visual record of skills once essential for a cavalry soldier's survival. The sound of rotors soon drowned even the thunder of hoofs. Heads lifted skyward as a CH-47 Chinook helicopter from the air cavalry roared overhead, its massive blades chopping the air. The crowd cheered, the old and new cavalry joining in a moment of living history. Following that came the chuck wagon demonstration. A driver snapped the reins, guiding the wagon with practiced ease. A rifleman rode alongside, and in the bed of the wagon sat the detachment's mascot, a blue heeler, tail wagging furiously at the crowd. The wagon bounced across the arena as the team showed how supplies, food, and even ammunition could be brought forward in the days of the frontier army.
The wagon was pulled by 2 to 4 mules, depending on the availability of animals and their time. Please double turn to the wagon. This is well specified by the War Department with the Indian Horse Detachment.
For a touch of showmanship, one trooper climbed a 5-foot stand and, to the shock of the crowd, flipped backwards through the air, landing cleanly on the ground. The eruption of applause and whistles nearly drowned out the bugle call, signaling the end of the hour-long event. The troopers lined up, horses side by side, sabers upright. One by one they were introduced to the audience. The commander and first sergeant then led the detachment to the stands, allowing the public to meet the horses face to face. Children ran forward with wide eyes, parents close behind, reaching to touch the velvety muzzles and braided manes. It was here that John overheard a question from a curious visitor about the stars branded on many of the horses' flanks. A trooper smiled and explained, "Those stars mean the horses came to us from the prison system. The few without a star were donated, some by families, some by horse nonprofits from across the country." The visitors nodded slowly, visibly moved, running her hand gently over the soft hide of a mare who once might have been in a much different fate. After the meet and greet, the crowd was invited to tour the grounds. John followed, his camera capturing the intimacy of life beyond the performance. In the small museum, 2 saddles sat on display. The heavier training saddle used daily, and the leaner cavalry battle saddle, worn smooth by the reenactments of troopers who honored the past. Outside, open paddocks allowed visitors to pet the horses at rest, their ears flickering lazily at the constant attention. Inside the farrier's shop, the sharp ring of hammer on iron filled the air. A trooper demonstrated how hooves were cleaned and shod, his hands moving with the confidence of someone who had done the work countless times. Next came the leather shop, smelling of oil and hide, where saddles, belts, harnesses, and boots were all crafted by hand. One trooper stood proudly with an 1841 saber, its steel flashing under the overhead lights, while another displayed a pistol once carried by soldiers of the era. Guests leaned in, fascinated, as the soldiers explained how both weapons had been used in mounted combat. By late afternoon, the tours thinned and the troopers returned their horses to the stables. John sat on a bench, pulling the camera's memory card free and reviewing the images. Frame by frame, the story of the day unfolded before him. Cannon fire, banners, horses leaping through the dust, sabers slashing through the air, children touching the faces of gentle giants. And through it all, the troopers, men and women who lived, if only for a while, as soldiers of the 1800s once had. John realized he hadn't just documented an event. He had preserved a fading chapter of history, one that would soon pass quietly into memory, leaving only photographs, stories, and the echoes of hooves across the Texas plains. By the time I packed up and left Fort Hood, the sun was already dipping low, painting the horizon in soft orange and purples. The drive home was quiet, the hum of the highway giving me space to think. My gear sat safely in the back seat, memory cards full of a day that felt heavier than most. That night, after dinner, and a call to Maya to tell her about the day, I sat down in my small editing space, the glow of the monitor awash over the room as I loaded the first images. I leaned back in my chair, cracked my knuckles, and let the photos roll across the screen, one by one. The cannon came first, flame leaping from the barrel, smoke billowing like a ghost rising from the past. Then the entrance of the commander and first sergeant, their faces steady, their mounts proud. I paused, zoomed in on the flag rippling behind them. For a moment, I thought about the men and women who had carried such colors in real battle, their lives pinned to the survival of the horse beneath them. Recalling the troopers cutting through balloons, sabers arcing with deadly precision, horses clearing obstacles, manes flying, pistols raised in quick succession, smoke curling from the barrels. Each image felt alive, even frozen in time, as though the dust and the sweat might rise again off the screen if I looked too long. Then came the quieter images. The trooper lifting a fallen comrade across the saddle. The blue heeler perched proudly in the wagon. The laughter of children as they reached their tentative hands to touch a star-branded horse. These struck me more deeply than the flash of the sabers or the war of the Chinook. They were human moments, reminders that this wasn't just a show. It was connection. It was memory being kept alive in small, fleeting gestures. Hours passed without me noticing. My editing software hummed. Sliders shifted. Exposures balanced. But more than post-processing, I found myself studying, absorbing. Each photo seemed to whisper, "Remember me. Remember us." When I finally leaned back, stretching stiff muscles, I realized what had kept me anchored in the chair for so long. I wasn't just editing a day's work. I was preserving a legacy that in less than a year would vanish. No more cannon salutes. No more saber charges through the dust. No more curious children asking about the stars on the horse's flanks. I sat for a long time with the final image. One hadn't planned, but had caught almost by accident. A trooper leading his horse back to the stables, the animal's head lowered, the man's hand resting lightly on its neck. The light was fading, the angle soft and warm, and the pair seemed to blur together, soldier and mount, partners stepping into the twilight. I saved the image, powered down the monitor, and sat in the dark for a while. Out the window, the Texas night was clear, stars scattered across the sky. Tomorrow I would return to landscapes and long exposures, to chasing the Milky Way across the lonely hills. But tonight, all I could hear were hoofs on dry earth, sabers striking the air, and the echo of a cannon salute ringing into history. And we hope you enjoyed this episode of the First Cav Horse Detachment here at Fort Hood, Texas. If you enjoyed this presentation, please consider subscribing and hit that like button. Just on a side note, John spent 3 years in the 4-7 Cav in Korea and retired in 2005 from the 1st Cavalry Division.